Welcome to Masterminds in Maintenance, a podcast for those with new ideas in maintenance. I'm your host, Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. Each week, I'll be meeting with a guest who's had an idea for how to shake things up in the maintenance and reliability industry. Sometimes the idea failed, sometimes it made their business more successful, and other times their idea revolutionized an entire industry. Today, I'm super excited. We've got Simon Murray back here on the show with us. Simon is the founder of Your Maintenance Coach, a community for maintenance teams who want to get to the next level. Welcome back to our show, Simon. Really excited to learn from you today.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be here again.
Just in case we've got some new listeners, could you start by kicking us off with briefly sharing a little bit more about yourself, your background, and how you're introduced to this field of maintenance and reliability?
I was probably about 16, 17, and my dad at the time was working for a company called Crown Holdings, big, large global packaging company. And they sent him to Japan to be trained as a TPM facilitator. And the stuff he was bringing back, even though I was only 16, 17, the way he was talking about things really just sparked a bit of an interest in all things improvement. And I found myself working in manufacturing as an engineering manager. And I really enjoyed it, just taking something that was broken and taking it through a journey of improvement to being fixed. And over about 12 years there, I worked for lots of different industries, say from bricks to bread and pretty much everything in between. And what I found is as I was moving through these different roles, I ended up in positions where I was really helping people to start on that reliability journey, really helping people to move out of chaos and a really reactive environment. There's no magic wand, but there's certainly a bit of a pattern to how to help businesses do that. So back in 2012, I decided the best way for me to help more people like myself was to take those learnings and start up my own business and go out since 2012. I've been out training and coaching other people in how to really get started and accelerate that reliability journey.
I know that you've been working on a campaign called the 7 Deadly Sins of a CMMS, and obviously Upkeep, us, we do categorize ourselves as a CMMS. Why did you decide to talk about the 7 deadly sins? And, ultimately, what are some of the consistent mistakes that you've seen people make?
There's very few things that pretty much every maintenance and reliability team have in common. And one of them is a CMMS. Everywhere I go, someone's using some sort of system. Because it impacts so many different people through the business. I'm not talking, there's maintenance team, but there's also, there's other departments that can utilize it. When it's not set up right, the amount of waste that's put through the business is just huge. When I'm talking to people about how engaged they are in the maintenance journey, lots of times I'm seeing resentment because the CMMS hasn't been set up to help them, and it becomes more of a chore than a tool to help improvement.
Yeah, I'm curious, Simon, just out of qualitative feedback and your qualitative experiences, what percentage of companies don't set up a CMMS correctly when first implementing it?
And I'll be honest, the vast majority of my work over the last 3 years has been helping people either set them up correctly to start with or going back in and helping them to fix it. At least 50, maybe even 70% don't go into setting up their CMMS with a proper roadmap of how they're going to use it.
Can you share with us, what are the 7 deadly sins?
I can. Okay, so number one, I see too many people who buy a CMMS just as a tool to trigger a preventative maintenance schedule, just so they don't forget about stuff. Well, look, if that's all you need it for, just use Excel or your calendar. Your CMMS is a much bigger tool to that. Yeah. Let's have a look at who the real customer is and what they want. So from an operations perspective, the operations team, they want to be able to put good job requests in or identify defects. But your maintenance planner, he needs a tool that's got some real structure behind it. Your tradesmen are really probably just looking for a nice, sexy interface on their iPad so they can go and get things done. And then your reliability engineers, well, they want really good analysis of clean history. And that's even before we start to talk to people like the finance team or OH&S or quality. So when I go into a business and I'm talking to all these different departments and all of a sudden they're thinking, well, actually all these different people in the business can leverage this tool, and it gives it a lot more momentum. And of course, the more people that you can involve in a system and change in a business, the more successful that's going to be. That's deadly sin number one. We bought the tool and we've just left it with maintenance. Number two, we've trained everybody in the system, but not in the processes. Let's imagine we've got a great business and they've gone out and all the different departments understand how they're going to use this CMMS and we've chosen the right bit of software. Then what do people normally do? Well, we send everyone out to training. What happens? They all come back with a different interpretation on how they're going to use that CMMS. One of the challenges with vendor training is that, when you've got clients who could be a small family bakery or they could be $1 billion mine using the same system, it's impossible for that vendor to really deliver the message of how they can get the best use from the system. What I really encourage is, understand your workflow and what you want to get out of that CMMS first. Understand when somebody raises a request, what's it going to look like? How's it going to be processed? And what does the tradesman need to see to get that work done? And then start bringing in this understanding of who are all the other business users, who are all the other customers. Again, what I really encourage, work out what you want to train people in, and then just train your people in the relevant bits. So number 2, we train people in the system, but not in the processes. Deadly sin number 3. Let's take a deep breath with this because I see this nearly everywhere. We let the asset tree get out of control. Yep. So everybody starts off their CMS, and of course the asset tree is the core of the system. It's used by everybody pretty much every time they go in the system. And for that reason, it just must be right. Often too many or too few levels. The second big problem that I see with asset trees is they're not in a logical order. And the last one, and I see this mostly with corporates, is strange naming conventions. Keep your asset name nice and simple so everybody knows what it is and capture all of that other information in the background somewhere. So that's number 3. We'll let the asset tree get out of control. Deadly sin number 4. People have no PM naming convention. If we look at who's looking at that PM or work order description as we go through the process, well, often it would start with the maintenance planner. He wants to be able to look at that description and understand really what that job is straight away. What do I need to do with it, if anything? Then, of course, we go off to the maintenance scheduler. Now, the scheduler needs to know various things about the job. When can I schedule it? Who's going to do it? Do I need equipment running or stopped? And if he can tell all of that from the title, from the description, it makes life a lot easier. And then, of course, finally, we've got the tradesman. The tradesman wants to look at his job list on his iPad or his pile of paper each day and just sort of do a little bit of a schedule for himself for the day. He doesn't want to be going through all of the detail. Very few systems I find actually bring all of this information to a nice, clearly visible screen where these 3 people can rely on it quite quickly. So let me give you a quick example of the naming convention I use. And this is what I've seen in great places, and I've kind of borrowed and adapted. I start off 3W as an example would be a 3 weekly PM. Underscore, then I'm going to look at which tradesman's going to do it. So I might put an abbreviation for mech, elec, lube. So 3 or 4 letters tells me who's going to do the work. Underscore, and then I'm going to put in an S or an R. Do I want the line stopped, or does the equipment need to be running to do this PM? Again, great one for the scheduler, great one for the tradesman to be able to look at the description of a PM and know whether he can do it with equipment running or stopped. Then next one, underscore. And often I will then put an SP in there if that PM needs spare parts. And the reason for that is lots of our PMs, when they get generated, the planner often doesn't touch them. They just flow straight through to scheduling because most of our PMs, their inspections, they don't need spare parts. So some can slip through the cracks sometimes. So I always make sure in the description I've got an SP, and that's a flag to the planner to say, hey, you need to do something with this. Final underscore, brief description of the work. So in that case, we would have 3W underscore mech underscore stop underscore S underscore SP underscore mixer bearing change. So simple, and everyone in the system knows what that description is. Bit of hard work getting them set up to start with, but once they're there, saves a massive amount of time all the way through. Deadly sin number 5, we can work around the system. And not only we can work around the system, we do work around the system. Now, this isn't so much about the tactics of the way you've set your CMMS up. This is about leadership and management. And it's really important because when things are being done outside of the software system, That's things we're not capturing. That's history we haven't got. That's costs we're not understanding. That's breakdowns and reliability problems we're not going to try and fix. This is when the maintenance manager gets an email. Can you go and fix this for me? Can you look into this? Or the tradesman gets a tap on the shoulder. Hey, the system takes too long. Can you just go and have a look at this one for us? Sometimes that's going to happen in an emergency environment. And, sometimes there's a breakdown. Obviously, that's what's going to happen. But lots of times, these things happen when it's not an emergency situation. And we've got things that should actually just go through the process. So deadly sin number 5, people can work outside of the system. Deadly sin number 6, we have no system health checks. Every maintenance team has lots of KPIs. But what I never see is KPIs that are actually dedicated towards the CMMS. Very rarely do I see a set of measures that show us, is our CMMS in good shape? Have we got duplicate work orders in there? Have we got trades and users listed who are no longer working in the business? First of all, there needs to be an owner of the CMMS. Now, this could be if it's a group level. Obviously, some large businesses will have someone across the group. If it's an individual factory, often this falls on the planner. But then there also needs to be a trigger, fairly regularly, whether it's 3 monthly or 6 monthly, the more frequently, the better, to actually go in the system and do some housekeeping, do some cleanup. So deadly sin number 6, we have no system health checks. No one's really doing that housekeeping. Okay, last but not least, deadly sin number 7. We don't improve, upgrade, or nurture our CMMS. People buy it and they don't, they set it up once and don't continue to invest in that program. And the reality is, what we need to be doing now, especially as CMMSs move online and subscription services, and there's constantly new features being added, you need to be working with your CMMS service provider to understand what's new. The business needs to understand the return on investment of that CMMS. And I've been giving you an example. I worked with a client a while ago and I think we were about 13, 14 tradesmen on this site. It was a large site, and the tradesmen were still using paper work orders. So planning process, everything was being followed really well. But when those work orders were released to the line, they were on paper. And we wanted to move this to iPads. Now, the justification, obviously, when we're putting the CapEx through to try and get the money for the iPads, the senior management are looking, you're only going to save a little bit in paper. So the numbers didn't marry up. But when we really dug deeper, what we found, and we did a trial, and what we found was, by the pure nature of the technician having his iPad with him all the time, the amount of information that was captured was just phenomenal. Every little stoppage here and there was now being captured. All of his spare parts he was using on jobs that previously he wouldn't write down, he's now capturing. So the wealth of information and the quality of that information was just phenomenal. And while that was still quite difficult to put dollars around, in the end we did, and the payback for those iPads ended up being less than a month. So the 7th, the last deadly sin, we don't improve, upgrade, or nurture our CMMS. And that's the 7 deadly sins, Ryan.
All right. Well, Simon, there's quite a bit of information there. If you had to boil it down to what's the most common, and let's call it like the most deadly, and the area that you see most businesses having the biggest opportunity to improve, what would you say that one is?
Well, the biggest one, where I always like to start, is around that asset tree, because it just gets everybody talking about it. It gets everyone, as I said, with the asset tree, because everybody goes in there every day. That's the biggest frustration I find with people. If you've got assets missing, if I go in to raise a job request for my machine and that machine's not in the asset tree, well, I'm not going to go in there again. So really, you've got to have that asset tree right. Everything else branches off from it as you develop your CMMS system.
Right. So I could imagine like that kind of stems a lot of other potential secondary, tertiary problems. If, the asset's not in there, then you go back to one of your other deadly sins, which is working around the system. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, well, if the asset's not in there, maybe I don't need to record this work because it's not important.
That's right. And it's the recording of the work, but also when you look at businesses that really leverage their CMMS, it is seen as the single source of truth for the whole business. So, You know, I do a lot with food manufacturers, and you know, when we have a food safety audit, that auditor will spend a lot of time looking at the CMMS and the maintenance system. And the easiest way to have a good audit is to be able to display real confidence that everything is well organized in your system. And same thing, yeah, if your assets are there, it takes a lot of questions out.
Is there a good standard that you would recommend to all of our listeners to get a better picture of what you mean by an organized asset tree? Is it an ISO standard that you follow?
I'll be honest, I'm not a great one for the ISO standards. So what I find, look, I work predominantly with small, medium-sized businesses. Often I'm working with under-resourced maintenance teams. And when we start to look at implementing some of the ISO standards, which are usually developed for much larger organizations, heavily resourced, in some cases, you know, come out of the military, they don't always translate to an easy implementation. So what I look for is, yes, you know, take some of those guidelines, you know, you go through Google, look at all the different standards, all the different examples, but really what you're looking for is just something that's nice and easy to follow.
Yeah. Well, hey, Simon, I know that we got the Cliff Notes version of the 7 Deadly Sins. Where can our listeners go to hear the full talk? Because I know that this is very, very top of mind to all of our Upkeep users and obviously Upkeep listeners today.
Great. Yeah. So on my website, yourmaintenancecoach.com, I will put a download in so people can go on and download a PDF, and I'll put some more information and some examples in there. And then on June the 25th, I'll be running a webinar which shows where this all fits into one of my programs, the Uptime Accelerator. The registration links are all on the website as well.
All right. I'm looking forward to that, Simon. And then lastly, where can all of our listeners go to connect with you and watch you and follow you on your journey?
Okay, so the easiest way is either jump on the website and download something, join the email list, or look for Simon Murray on LinkedIn. I'm posting regularly on LinkedIn, and that's where you'll find out about things like this up and coming.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Simon, for joining us. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to today's Masterminds in Maintenance. My name is Ryan Chan. I'm the CEO and founder of Upkeep. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very active, or you can reach me directly at ryan@onupkeep.com. Until next time, thanks so much again, Simon.
Thanks, Ryan.